again. So because I missed that one. Thank you. As Rupert likes to say, who's ready to get learned? You want to learn them? You ready to learn them, Rupert?
We're fixing to learn them.
We're fixing to learn them. Michael Coles, come on down. All right, Michael, that mic is for you.
Thank you.
Here is the clicker. All right, we're going to put 6 minutes on the clock for you. As soon as your presentation is up.
Don't forget the sound in the way.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. See?
No, you've got.
All right.
You've got.
Well, let's make that little. Experience. All right.
Michael, here we go.
Here we go. Hi, good morning. My name is Mike Coles, and I'm with Choose Your Reader. So I've done a lot of these Million Cups events, and the whole thing about Choose Your Reader and about these Million Cups events is you got to get a big idea. What's the big idea? Before I tell you the idea, though, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. So who am I? I'm a lawyer, I'm a screenwriter, and I'm also now a children's book author, publisher. All right. Now those things don't make sense. They're not related. Exactly right. They don't make sense, but it does. I'm a storyteller. It doesn't matter if I'm telling your story to a jury, putting a story on a screen, or putting a story in a book. That's what I do, and I'm very proud of my ability to tell a story. But more important than that, I'm very, very proud of the fact that I'm a dad, and I've been able to really take that storytelling experience and use that as a father. That's been amazing for me. But I'm a divorced dad, so I don't really get the chance to spend every night with my son doing that classic bedtime story. So that is where I got the big idea. I wanted to be able to have that storytelling experience with my son. So here's my storytelling skill. True story. My son says to me, I'm putting him to bed. I said, okay, let's get a book for a reading. He says, no, Dad, make up a story tonight. Now, he doesn't realize I'm a storyteller. You're in my sweet spot, kid. All right? So I said, all right, give me 3 things you want in your story. And he said, golf ball, soccer ball, and a baseball. And I said, okay, now you're pushing it. So let's figure that out. So that night I told him this story from good to bad to great. All right, now tell him the story. Who's got kids? Who has kids? Now you know. You tell a story, they like it, they want it again, right? And again and again. Except I didn't remember it, so I had to go write it down, right? So now I've got this whole process of writing the stories down as I'm making them up, and I'm able to now call them back up on my phone. And then the kid, he pushes the envelope one more time. Dad, where are the pictures? All right, I'm a storyteller. Not an illustrator, kid. So that's not gonna work. Now I gotta go out and I gotta hire an illustrator? Well, yeah, I did. So now I've got these books that have been written by me and illustrated, and I've put all this time and energy into it. What am I gonna do with it? Yeah, I'm gonna go publish these books. I'm gonna hire an agent, I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna take 10 years and someone's gonna look at it probably in 12, all right? Or I'm gonna self-publish it. I'm gonna be on the road, traveling around and doing all these different events, trying to get people to buy my book, and that takes me away from my kid. That's the whole thing I'm trying to get away from. I want this to be about a relationship with my son, and that's the big idea. How do I take these books that I wrote and created and make them useful for my son? And the aha moment was, it's not just about me, right? There are a lot of people who are actually not necessarily going to be with their kid, right? Divorced parents, they're obviously gonna have these issues, but there are other people that have these issues, right? Grandparents don't live with their kids, right? With the grandkids, so they're not around. You've got people who are in, traveling for work, whether they're in the military, they're working late, it doesn't matter. If you're all these different lifestyles that you've got where people are away from the kid at bedtime, okay? These people want to be there and have this experience, and that to me is why I said they need Choose Your Reader. And so that's why I had to build this platform. So, we launched. January 1st of this year, we launched our beta, got it out there in the market for 90 days, tested it out, it works. So I want you to have a chance to actually see it in motion. So I'm gonna run through this here. Quickly log in, so this is live, right? This is what it looks like today. You log in, you go to a story, you click a story, there's from good to bad to great. The key to it is, if you know karaoke, you can use this. You press the record button, the words highlight on the screen on your phone. You read out loud, it records your voice. You are building an audio book with your voice for your kid, or your grandkid, or your niece or nephew, whoever it is. Page by page, you are able to record each page of the story. If you make a mistake, the doorbell rings, you get a phone call, you go back and you record that one page. Nobody wants to get to page 9 and have to start all over, right? So that was one of the challenges that we had to solve from a technology standpoint. So we got in there, we had this thing built. I'm not gonna take you through the whole thing. Trust me, it's good to bad to great, but it's great, right? So if you wanna check it out, you can check it out on the app, but I'll skip ahead here in a second just so that you can get a sense of what happens at the end, because that's the real magic of this app. So you get down to the end of this story, you're gonna have a finished recording. In this instance, you've got a 10-page book, not very long, take you a few minutes, you save it, and now you've got this actually locally stored on your phone. And you can share it with any other phone. So now, if you're in Florida, but the kid's in Seattle, if you're in literally England, right, and you want to share it with someone who's in Brazil, you can do that. You can share it by text or by email. And so now you've got this kid who's building his or her own library of the voices and the stories, connecting them with people in their lives. All right, so a couple of things, right? This was my revenue model when I started out, right? I said I want to do this per story and then move up, and then I realized I'm able to accelerate this. So we were looking at 2020 to go to a subscription model. We're doing that July 1st. So we are moving fairly quickly here. So now, how can you help me do this, right? The key that I need is to really, first of all, sharing the app, telling people about it. That's important, but that's not really a major customer acquisition strategy, is going around with 1 million cups, 35, 40 people at a time. What I really need, though, is authors. I need content, all right? So we are mining the public domain. So we've got Mother Goose, and we've got the Grimm brothers, and we've got Sherlock Holmes coming out later this month. But we want to have some original works out there as well. So we want to do that. So we wanted to launch 20 stories in Q1. We launched 30. We wanted to have foreign language stories. We've got 3 languages now. We're going to be at 6 by the end of June. And then we wanted to have the ability to search and categorize stories. That also launched at the beginning of April. So we've been able to take all of our Q1 goals and knock them out of the park, and so we're moving on now. Q2 is all about refining the app, and so we're going to have an even smoother, nicer user interface that comes out here at the end. So a couple of things. These are some of the books that I've written for my son that you can see. And again, it was all a part of the process. So as I mentioned, we've got some other stuff. We've even got some Old Testament stuff that's coming out. We've got some mythology works. So we're really looking at expanding this universe. We anticipate being at about 100 books by the end of Q2. All right, so people ask me, Mike, what are you doing here? Are you creating a tech company? Are you a content creator by writing all these books? Or are you a content publisher? And the short answer is Choose Your Reader is all of those things. Thank you very much.
Great job. So before we go to questions, how many 1 million cups have you done now? What number is it?
Let's run the numbers.
Gobs.
Dozen?
Dozen?
Yeah.
Hey, that's good, right? We love to see that when people tour. So thank you for being here today. Let's go to Josh. First question.
Hey, great presentation. I'm an author. How does this work for me if I want to contribute? What's the process, and do I get something? Do I get compensation? How does that whole process work?
Yeah. Rule 1, I told you I'm a writer, I'm a lawyer, and I'm a dad. Rule 1 when I built this was satisfy all 3 of those roles in my life. If I make a decision in the company, I need to be comfortable in all 3 of those. So as an author, absolutely I'm paying, all right? And so yes, what we do is we pay you an annual license for your work. So you get the money from us for the year. You don't have to worry about per download. If you know anything about authors, part of the challenge in that universe is keeping up with how many books were actually sold. Eliminate that. License it for 1 year, there's your fee, and we're rolling. The other thing to keep in mind is typical book publishing takes how long to get to a shelf. One book on one shelf takes 18 months, 24 months. If you want to illustrate it, $25,000 to $35,000, one book, one shelf. It takes me $1,000, 60 days. I'm in 150 countries, 6 languages.
Jeff.
I'm also an author, so especially with some of the kids stuff. The question is, now I've got the stories. Do you have the illustrators? You do have the illustrators? Oh my God,
That's right. We have an entire. So if you look back, what I did was I refused to have one illustrator illustrate multiple books in the beginning. What I was doing was I was taking the experience and vetting each illustrator myself, so you don't have the risk anymore. Now you can look at the books that are already illustrated and say, I like book X. We know who illustrated it. We go to them and they do your book.
Josh, we're going to have a lot of fun here.
Oh, yeah, and I know some illustrators also.
Awesome. Yeah.
Hi, I want to say this is great. I used to make up stories for my kids every night, and every night it's awesome, they loved it. So this is like, oh my God, this is awesome, somebody thought about that. Question is, like, are you able to do dual? Like have maybe the mom and the dad do the reading, go back and forth, or, you know.
So let's take that question specifically. So first, can the child have 2 books? Can they have Jack and the Beanstalk twice? Absolutely. But can the child have Jack and the Beanstalk page after page bouncing between? Well, only if mom and dad physically move the device between them. We don't have a way to blend 2 different recorded stories. We've got some proprietary technology that creates that synced pagination, so we couldn't merge 2 stories. We don't have that. So, but if the 2 parents are exchanging the device, or if the kid wants, and we do intend for the kid to have Jack and the Beanstalk 10 times by the 10 adults in his or her life that matter most, absolutely.
Okay, the second question is, are you able to do avatars, like, for the story? Like, if I want, you know, to have my face avatar in there so that it's more customized, like, maybe the cover of the story, or, you know, under Choose Your Reader part.
Yeah, so we have never looked at creating an avatar. What we have thought about is creating a video at the end of the story, right? Where you record yourself. One of the important things for me is that this is a literacy tool and a language tool, and that's when I said the 3 hats I have. That's my dad hat, is that I don't want this to just be entertainment. I want my child to grow and learn. And so when I built the platform, the key to the karaoke style was, if you know how kids learn to read, they learn by you pointing at the words as you go along. So I wanted to integrate that experience, but again, when you're not physically there. Because my priorities are education and relationship building, I have really pushed back what I'm going to call customization individually by the user, except for the notion that we can add that video at the end so they can see mom, dad, grandma, grandpa as they're finishing that story.
I am here.
I don't know where
What
they're
are what are the 6 languages that you have right now?
So today we have English, Spanish, and French. Those are knocked out. We're looking at now adding Mandarin, Hindi, and German.
The reason why I ask is we also promote on the Japanese side because, as you said, a lot of the Japanese families, they work so much, they don't get to hear their dad. And literally, the country is suffering from where the dad sees them asleep in the morning and sees them asleep at night. This would be a major help on there. I know that it's harder to get the Japanese language, but I can see a big market for it right there.
It's actually incredibly easy to get the Japanese language for us. I mentioned I'm a lawyer. Part of my practice is immigration law. So I had a host of translation resources available to me right out of the gate. So when I needed to do translations, I went to those resources and got those things. So I can actually get it in Japanese before the end of this month if we chose. It takes us less than 30 days to get a language up and running.
Okay, let's go here, right here. Okay.
So you mentioned how you have multiple people in this child's life telling the same story, and you want those stories to be saved. Is that categorized? Do you have different ways to kind of put them into their own folder, and, you know, this is mom, these are the books from mom, these are the books from dad, or are they all just, you know, flowing in one area?
So from the reader standpoint, we're looking at it as an adult who understands categories and searches and all of that. So as the adult, it is very much like a Netflix experience. You've got categories, and then you can also search if you want Cinderella, and you don't want to try to figure out, you don't know that it's a Grimm fairy tale. You just type Cinderella, Cinderella comes up. So that's the adult side. The child side is not that way because kids don't necessarily at that age understand organizational structure the same way. They just have a search, and they can start to type in Cinderella. And again, the universe, we got literally 100 books, but the kids are not gonna have 100 books. So they're gonna get Cinderella, and then 4 icons will pop up, and it will say Cinderella, and then it's mom, it's dad, it's whomever, and they can pick from there. We anticipate that there will, again, because it's a mobile device, the kid will have an adult readily available to help. It's not that we expect the kids to be off on their own, essentially using the device without adult supervision. So we expect that the adults will be there to help them navigate that. But then as the child grows, if you know kids, right, they're able to manipulate devices better than some adults, ultimately. So ultimately the kid will be able to do all of those different search functions, but initially they would not necessarily be able to, especially as the younger ages. We really, again, screen time is an important thing for me as a dad. So we really do not advocate using the device under 2. So really once they get over 2, they're in the 3 and now going up to 7, 9. That's the age group that we would think is the most appropriate for the device.
Question here.
Oh, is this going on?
I can hear you regardless.
I think everyone can hear me. I'm very loud. It seems to be a missing component here. You said it was a literacy tool, and it would seem it would be so much more if the kids themselves read their own stories. And so the question is, for whom are they reading stories? It would be other their peers, and that kids could almost have a social network as a platform sharing stories that they have read between themselves. This it sets up the expectation that Choose Your Reader would be a platform, and this is to say, while each child has only one grandparent or 2, or 4, depending how you look at it, grandparents have 16, 17 grandchildren, depending on how many kids they have. And so the Choose Your Reader could go viral if people could share socially all of the stories between all the people that want to hear those readers. Have you thought of that, and how would you take this to a social network platform?
So I'm going to carve that into 2 parts. The first part, we're absolutely thinking about the child as a reader. So one of our next marketing campaigns is basically talking about grandma read to you. Now you're older, you want to read to her, right? And so that's part of that whole process, is getting the child as they get older and more skilled at reading to become readers to the people in their lives, because the platform is not forcing you to be a child or an adult in the way you use it. The platform is entirely one set of operations that are available. In terms of social networking, I have not frankly looked at trying to create this social networking piece. Part of my concern is that the age of the users is fairly low. And so again, I'm a dad. There's no ads in this app. Why? I don't want you marketing to my kid. I'm not going to market to your kid. Similarly, in order to get a story on the app, an adult has to receive the story. Why? I don't want strangers sending my kids stories, so I'm not going to send your kids stories from strangers, right? So there's a lot of what I call parental control that's built into it. As a parent, I really wanted that.
So you mentioned that you've been around a dozen 1 million cups, okay? Just FYI, when you go through the approval process to present at 1 million cups, then you're automatically accepted to all 180 others.
I'm not going to get that.
All right, I understand. But it would be fun. So my question is, has this was a good presentation. There's some things that I don't see financial and whatever, but it's a good presentation. Has this presentation evolved since the first presentation? And
Oh, yeah.
how has this journey helped you develop your idea?
So the first presentation I did was on January 2nd of this year in Charlotte. And my son lives in North Carolina. I live in Dallas, and so I commute every other week to North Carolina, and that's kind of the big part of building that relationship and then building the app. So I go to Charlotte, and I do the presentation, and I start getting some ideas. And so if you look at the way the app looks today, it's incredibly different than the way it looked back then, on January 2nd. On that day, I announced some goals. Those are the goals that I showed you that we've been able to meet, but there are some new goals that have sort of emerged as part of this process. So the first 90 days were all about, 1, validation in the market, and then number 2, getting different refinements for the product. And so we're actually going to be launching here just in about 10 days, our 3rd version, and that will be sort of the final moment of, we feel like we have done everything that we can to really say that this is the smoothest, cleanest interface that we have. So many of those ideas came out of 1 Million Cups presentations. I have to say, and it was invaluable. People would come up to me and they would say, you gotta have a Facebook login, right? I didn't have a Facebook login. I got a Facebook login, right? People would come up to me and say, oh gosh, this would be great if you could have it so that, one of the people said, I want to be able to record these stories, and then I want to be able to have them forever, because maybe I'm gone, right? Or maybe, and so the next thing you know, we built a server and set up a pricing model that will allow you to keep your stories literally for as long as we exist as a company, that thing will be available to you. So people also raise concerns about security from an IT standpoint. I went out and hired an IT guy, and he's doing some security and stress testing this month on the app. So all the different questions that come up as you're raising them, social networking, I hadn't considered that. I'll still look at it and how do I integrate my concerns as a parent with the value of a social networking platform. So yeah, absolutely, this has been great.
Let's come over here to Carlos and then we'll go back.
Yeah, just picture this in your mind for a minute. There is this video going on, right? And this video is talking about this lawyer that he went through the process of getting divorced. It was something extremely painful for him that it took him to create this app. And because he was able to see the pain in all these inmates, he started giving this app for free to them so they can have that for their kids. And always remember that the best advertising and marketing is gotta come from your pain because you're the best avatar. So don't lose that because that pain is the one that created this. That's the number one. And then the number two thing that I wanted to mention to you is, what about for the future? What do you think about, like, just remember, you created these because you were trying to create these stories, to create something that as a father, I start creating these stories, making up these stories for my kid, and then that they can go and kind of set it with little cartoons or you know what I mean, like to pick and put them in different places so they create their own, just for the future. So
I have looked at a create your own story concept. I don't intend to do that in this space, but it's certainly something we've looked at. We did file a patent for the technology behind this, and so we are looking at a number of ways to sort of replicate that technology and deploy it in new platforms. So I don't know that I intend to go that route, but it's certainly a question that I've gotten multiple times. So it's in the head here, rolling around. Who knows what's going to roll out?
Mike, over here. Thanks so much for your presentation. It was really phenomenal. As a father myself, I can certainly attest to the value of this. I had one question and one comment. Firstly, along the lines of this idea of social networking, I just want to make sure I understand. As a parent, so you said a parent will vet what stories their children get to see. Do you have the opportunity, rather than creating your own story, but to look through a library of other stories that other parents have created and decide, well, okay, I'm not going to record this one myself, I just want to share this. Is it open in that regard? And then I have a comment after.
We can do that. So I had a conversation with an actor who was a voice of a character on Sesame Street. And we talked a little bit about it. And so there's a thought about creating a choose your reader specific character that reads all the books, as one example. Now, the thing is, that's definitely not relationship building anymore, right? But it's still literacy, it's still language development, right? I don't know, like my son speaks 3 languages, right? 2 of which I don't speak. 2 of which no one else in the family speaks, to be honest, right? But he's picking them up, right? And so the language acquisition component, we thought about having the ability for the child to develop linguistic skills outside of their native or home language and providing that content for them so that if you want your kid to learn Spanish and you don't speak Spanish, you don't need to go out and find a Spanish speaker and say, hey, will you read to my kid? We'll provide someone who's done that for you.
But in the other piece, I love what you're doing about creating an opportunity for the children to tell stories as well. If I can give you just a quick story. I have 2 sons, and my younger one, when he was 5, was in kindergarten, and his teacher was struggling to get him to write even the most basic sentence. I started reading to him Chronicles of Narnia, as I had read to his brother. He got into it, decided he wanted to start telling those stories in his own words, and it led to him writing not just sentences, but books, going on to doing animations, and is now actually a nationally recognized award-winning filmmaker.
Congratulations.
Oscar graduate out of Winter Park High going to film school. So there's something really powerful in getting kids telling stories, but that I think it's rooted in them hearing really well told stories. I really applaud what you do.
Thank you.
Okay, so last one real quick, back in the go ahead.
You keep mentioning that this is an app now. Do you have plans in the future to make it available on other platforms just besides an app? Because that is, a barrier to getting access. Is it available on the web or other platforms?
So to be specific, what we have looked at is what I'm going to call television-based, right? So smart TVs, Apple TV, that sort of thing. We could put it on the web. It's certainly not, it's easier, frankly, than getting it into a mobile app, right? Programming from a web standpoint is much easier. So I've thought about it, but the experience that I like is the kid holding the device and feeling connected to the person who's got the voice. So I'm not resistant to it and saying no, but it's certainly not a high priority. But it is certainly something that's come up more than once before about having it on the web. But I think my prior sort of commitment to an educational experience, because we want to take this into schools. So schools that have smart TVs and other kinds of access to apps in a way that is not just a handheld device, we want to be able to deliver that experience in the institutional environment of a school before we look at just a standard web interface. That's been our priority today.
Just a quick comment is we develop voice-enabled applications, and this would lend itself very easily to that, so happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah, let's talk then, absolutely.
Mike, last one, how can we as a community help?
Yeah, so I need that sort of connective piece, right? One of the things that I've done is I've done 12 of these, is I've traveled to specific locations where I thought that my target audience might reside. And my target audience is one of three types: teachers or school administrators of any sort. If you know anyone in that capacity, I would love to have them connected. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you search Choose Your Reader, or just come down and I'll help you connect with us on there. But we want to connect with teachers and school administrators, one. Two, we want to connect with military families. So we've got a write-up coming up in a military families magazine that I just learned about. So we want to have that. And then the last thing is that we'd like to be able to connect to any kind of what I'll call senior living communities of any sort. We want to get this into those communities as well. So if you've got relationships of any of those three, let's talk.
Mike Coles, everybody.